Randy, welcome to the show.
It is a pleasure to be here, Wayne. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad we were able to make this happen.
I know it's been a little, we've been two ships passing in the night.
Yes, we have been. You are correct about that. Let me just start. I always ask these little kind of get to know you type questions. So let me ask those. Coffee or tea?
Is this our first date?
It kind of is like a first date. That's how I see these things, you know?
All right. Okay. I got you.
So coffee or tea for you, Randy?
This is Law Dog Coffee, as a matter of fact. In fact, it is the company that sponsors the Wounded Blue, our canine companion program. It's great coffee. It's Law Dog. It is they deliver it directly to your house, and It is amazing coffee. This is the only thing I drink anymore. Plus, they literally are the sponsor for the Wounded Blue canine companion program. So I have deep loyalty to them, and phenomenal coffee. It's lawdogcoffee.com.
Very good, and I'll have to try that as well. And that's what I
really do.
Okay, and I love that too, that the money's going to something like the Wounded Blue, and we can talk more about that later. Yeah, for those of you watching, you can see that mug there. That's awesome. So do you have a best or worst travel story, Randy?
Travel story? Well, I guess I have kind of a funny one.
Okay.
I was, before this happened a couple of years ago, and I was on a flight, and I was coming back to Vegas from somewhere, I don't remember where. And you know how you can always spot somebody that's going to be an asshole when they come on the plane?
Yes.
You know, you can always see him. So this guy comes on the plane. I pegged him instantly as an asshole, and he's drunk and he's obnoxious and he's already a problem. And I can see the flight attendants checking him, you know, as even as he's walking in. So he comes in, and as luck would have it, he sits right in front of me.
Of course.
Aisle seats. So we take off, and he is just being obnoxious. I mean, he's drunk and he's being obnoxious. And the flight attendant 2 or 3 times came over to him and told him to chill, right? And he was really nasty and rude to her. And so I got up and went to the flight attendant and showed her my badge, and I said, look, if there's a problem, if you don't have a marshal on board, if things come down to it, give me the high sign. So it continues. He's getting more and more nasty and rambunctious, and then he grabs, as this flight attendant is walking by him, he grabs her ass.
Wow.
and she turned and she gave me the high sign, and I just reached over and of course we don't call them chokeholds, but I did a lateral vascular neck restraint on him and put him out, dragged him into the aisle where the captain came out, and they all carry handcuffs now. So cuffed him up, and he woke up, and he was like, he had no idea what happened to him, and literally dragged him to the back of the airplane where he hung out until we got back to Las Vegas, where they took him to jail. So I got to say, that was kind of fun.
That's awesome. You know, I will say, Randy, as I was researching for this show and looking over your history and so forth, and maybe Las Vegas is the common denominator, but stuff like that seems to follow you, I'm finding.
Well, I was very active as a police officer. And well, you know, I was a cop for 10 years in a small town before I joined Metro. So I was a patrolman, and so that was our rank back then, patrolman, and then a detective for 4 years. So I did a total of 10 years in Princeton, New Jersey, but it was a 30-officer department. It was really boring, and it was kind of a very liberal environment. And my working philosophy, shall we say, clashed with the hierarchy, and it was just better for me to move on. So I joined Las Vegas Metro PD, starting all over again as a rookie, going through the academy, the whole bit, and then spent 24 years here. But you know, Vegas at that time, that was 1986 when I moved here.
Yeah.
And it was the fastest growing city in the country. And it was the place to be a cop. I've got to tell you, it was an amazing place.
Okay. What, we can kind of roll into that a little bit. I mean, tell me a little bit about that journey and what it was like early on in Vegas. Quick question. When you mentioned New Jersey, now granted, I'm from Florida and then I'm originally from the Midwest, so Indiana. So New Jersey's a foreign world to me as much as Las Vegas is. But I would think that when you mention like some of the politics and liberalism and some of these other things, that there's a lot of similarities or completely different in that time frame.
Oh, well, Princeton is a very educated community and was very, very liberal even back then.
Okay.
I mean, it was let me illustrate that. So I was a detective. This is about the time I was deciding to leave. And there was and Princeton University was in the town. And while they had their own security department, it wasn't a full-fledged police department. So any crimes would be investigated by us.
Okay.
So there was a hot prowl burglary where I was assigned to go investigate, and it was in one of the dorms of the university. And when I say dorm, I mean these are pretty nice places, right?
Right. And
so this woman student tells me that she was sleeping and woke up, and there's a guy in her room, a black male, grabbing up her jewelry. And she said, "Well, what are you doing here?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just cleaning." And
of course you are.
Stole all her stuff and left. So I'm looking at she and then she tells me it was 3 days ago. And I said, 3 days ago? Why didn't you call the police right after it happened? We could have maybe caught the guy. And she goes, "I didn't want anybody to think that I was racist." Now, this is 1986.
Wow.
So you can imagine what it is now. But that was the kind of thought processes that
wow.
took place in that community. So anyway, it was best that I moved on.
Which makes it so difficult. I mean, just that story makes it so difficult for law enforcement to even be able to do their jobs when you're struggling with those kind of mentalities.
Yeah, well, I mean, and now we're seeing, on steroids, this type of thinking process in a lot of places. I mean, look at Minneapolis, where there's a whole affluent neighborhood which refuses to call the police when they are victimized, and they are victimized a lot, armed robberies, you name it, because in their minds, they don't want to appear racist.
Right. Yeah, it's sad because it's not going to be good for anything. Bless you. It's not going to help with solving any sort of race issues, and it's certainly not going to help with what law enforcement should be doing, which is serving that community and actually helping create civility there.
It's pretty bizarre. That thinking is pretty bizarre, but it's not. I mean, look at what we're seeing throughout the country. We're seeing Portland, we're seeing Seattle, we're seeing New York. I mean, so many areas where it is literally become a war zone, and no reaction from the cities. In Portland's case, they empower the Antifa looters and rioters, as well as the governor refuses to even accept that this is a reality. It's the most bizarre. This is the most bizarre time for policing I've ever seen, and I've been in the game a long time.
Well, and that was a perspective I was wanting to maybe hear a little bit about from you, is just what you thought. Because you were, at least according to your bio, you were quite young when you started in Princeton. Is that correct?
I was 19. They had just changed the age of majority from 21 to 18.
Okay.
And so for a very brief period of time, you could actually become a cop at 18. I became a cop at 19 due to a weird set of circumstances. Wow. So I get ready to go to the police academy, but you had to be 21 to buy ammunition because of federal law. So,
right.
So my mom had to go buy my bullets for me before I went into the police academy.
Oh, that's a great story. What do you think? So even, I mean, 21, 22. So I was older when I came into this career. I was in my early 30s when I started in law enforcement. So for me, I had a completely different perspective and some life experience when I came into this job. And now as a frontline supervisor with my younger guys in my squad and so forth that I'm working with, I mean, I'm getting these guys in their early 20s, and I really see what do you think for someone young coming in this career? Like, what kind of things should they be focusing on and thinking about? And because the world's changing as well.
You know, well, that's a really interesting question, because I look back on some of the decisions I made when I was a young police officer, and now I shudder at some of those decisions.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're making a decision as a cop, it's affecting people's lives forever.
Right.
So I look at the mature. I was too young to become a cop. I realize that now. I didn't realize it then.
Right.
Because the world was very black and white to me. You know, it was either everybody went to jail, everybody got a ticket. There was no gray area. It was right and wrong. That was it. But I was very fortunate a couple of years into my career to have an amazing mentor. I actually wrote this story in one of my books, and it had a profound effect on me. So I had a sergeant, and I was a cadet before I became a cop. So I worked in this small department since the time I was 16, and I knew everybody. I knew him. And there was a guy who was a detective when I first became a cadet there. And this guy, you could tell this guy was good. And he was a very meticulous investigator, but a natural leader kind of guy. And then he promoted to sergeant, and then I was assigned to work for him. So I had nothing but deep respect for this guy. And of course, you know, in a small department of 30 cops, you only have 5 guys on a squad, and everybody knows each other very, very well. You know your strong points and your weak points. And so, you know, I was interacting with the sergeant all the time, and this guy was just good. I mean, he was fearless, but he was kind, but he was just somebody I really looked up to. So I wanted to please him, and I was out there running and gunning all the time, man. I made more arrests than the rest of the police department put together. And that was a constant. And let me tell you, that didn't sit well with a lot of the older cops. You know, I can't tell you.
It never does.
I can't tell you how many guys told me today, "Hey, slow down, man. Slow down." I mean, it got heated sometimes, but that's the way I looked at things. So one night after graveyard shift, the sergeant, his name was Tom, said, "Hey, you want to go? Let's go get some breakfast." So I said, "Yeah, let's go." So we go to one of the diners in New Jersey, and we're sitting there having coffee and having breakfast, and I'm recounting my night to him. Yeah, and then I did this, and this guy, I took this guy to jail, and of course he knew, small town, he knows everything I'm doing.
Right.
And he's nodding, and he's shaking, yeah, and he's letting me go on and on and on. And then he tells me, he says, "Randy, you're really a good cop." And I'm like, "Yeah." he says,
well, thanks for affirming that.
Yeah. Hey. He says, you know the laws. You go out there and you're working all the time. You have a great knowledge of search and seizure. You're this, you're that. And I mean, my head's like, yeah. And then he springs it on me, and he says, "But do you know the difference between being a good cop and being a great cop?" And that was a question that I did not expect. Right. And I thought about it, and I said, "No." And he got a smile on his face, and he said, "It's one word. It's called compassion."
Wow.
It was like somebody turned a switch on. He was telling me in the way a real leader does how to improve, and what I needed to do to make a personal adjustment with just that phrase.
Wow.
And I got to tell you, it changed the way I did policing from then on. And not only that, but it changed the way I became when I became a leader, a police leader.
Right.
It changed the way that I led my own cops. So it shows you that that's what leadership is about, man.
Yeah.
And that's why I spent 14 years as a sergeant. I didn't even want to promote to lieutenant. I did it out of a sense of obligation, if you will.
Right.
But the sergeant's role, to me, is the most important on the police department. That and the FTO.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with you, because pretty much based on what you just said, because of the ability to mentor the younger and newer. Younger isn't always a true statement, but newer
Right.
members of law enforcement. That's great. When you were a sergeant, was that primarily over patrol, or did you also move on to CID and so forth before promoting?
I spent during my 14 years as a sergeant, most of it was on uniform assignments.
Okay.
I had one stint, which was really cool, as a federal task force commander. My squad we worked a predominantly gang infested area, so we knew the streets and we knew all the players, and there was a federal task force that was formed to take out the major bad guys in this area. So they literally plucked my squad out of patrol, assigned it to a federal task force. And you know how sometimes an FBI task force, there's friction.
There can be. I've been fortunate to see a lot of positive ones, but there certainly can be.
Right, there can be. But I was the supervisor for Metro, and the supervisor for the FBI had been my old partner when I was working narcotics as a detective. And he and I actually lived together for a period of time before he got married. So he was the FBI supervisor. I was the Metro supervisor. We were, very close friends. So there was none of that interagency nonsense that sometimes take place.
Right.
And we really rocked and rolled, man. It was a great experience. I loved it. We put together great cases. We literally transformed the area. It took several years, but we transformed the area into from the highest crime and gang infested area into a livable area. So that was really cool. And then I ran afoul of the sheriff at the time. And, whether you're on a small department or a big department, there's politics that always plays a role.
Always
plays a role. And sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. But when you run afoul of the sheriff in a big agency like Metro, sometimes you can go hide and sometimes you can't. So I ran afoul of the sheriff and I had a target on my back in a big way. And so somebody that was in a Randy friendly chain of command said, "Randy, you got to get off the street because they're going to get you."
No.
And he says, "Come in and be in charge of our advanced training." So I took a desk job, which I really didn't want to do.
Right.
But in the weird way that the world works, Wayne, it turned out to be one of the biggest blessings for my career and also for my own personal growth. I learned that I love training. Yeah. And I got the opportunity to play a role in the 9th largest police department in the country, creating training programs and bringing in the best trainers that there were. So it turned out to be a phenomenal experience. Gave me my first opportunity to write. And as a result of that, published my first book.
Oh, wow.
And wound up writing for police periodicals and magazines from then till now. I mean, so it really played, you think it's the worst thing that could happen to you. It turned out to be the best. And that pattern has played out several times in my career. But it literally transformed my life. And then I outlasted the sheriff and he left and life was good again. I went back to the street where I belong.
Okay. Before eventually moving on to lieutenant, right? Towards the end of your career. Mm-hmm. You published that.
I spent the last 6 years of my career as a lieutenant, graveyard patrol lieutenant.
Oh, wow.
Best job.
It is.
Because in Vegas, where's all the action?
At night.
Right? And I'm the highest ranking guy.
Exactly. Admin's all at home.
Exactly. So it was a tremendous, I love it. and of course, I didn't go hide in the office. Like, it's an unfortunate reality that many people choose to promote in order to get off the street.
Right.
That wasn't my ideal at all. So I stayed on the street as a field lieutenant, and got there and mixed it up just like the youngsters did, and realized at the end of my career, which ended very abruptly and unexpectedly, when I had a stroke in my police car. But I realized at that point that I had kind of outlived my street usefulness.
Right.
Because I had 34 years on total as a cop when I retired. Now, and I intended to continue going, not accepting the fact that you're, after 30 years as a cop, your body is beat up, your mind is beat up, your emotional status is beat up. And I didn't realize, and I didn't know until it was snatched away from me, that I probably should have gone maybe a couple of years before.
Okay.
But it was the scariest thing that ever happened to me, Wayne. I was on patrol, and luckily, whenever I was watch commander, I would take a patrol officer with me so that I could get to know my people. Because it's, I had a shift is 120 people in
right.
Vegas. So, in order to get to know my folks, I would ride with them so that they could see that their lieutenant actually knew how to do some police work now and then. And I got to know my folks. So it was the first night I've ever ridden with this young man. And we're on patrol. It's 2:30 in the morning, right in front of Bally's Hotel. And I literally felt my brain slowing down. And I knew I was having a stroke. And I stopped the car. And I said to this kid, I said, "Get me medical. I'm having a stroke." And he looks at me like, is the lieutenant screwing with me? Because that's,
I'm sure.
Right. And then he realized, no, he's not. And so I got out of the car to go to the passenger side in case he needed to get me to the hospital. And in that ensuing couple of seconds, I started speaking gibberish. And I knew I was speaking gibberish. What's going on, and you're just out of control.
Wow.
And then I lost the ability to speak. I lost the ability to move, and I literally crumpled to the pavement. And that was the end of my career. That was the end of my job. And there was a lot going on in my life at that time. My mother had died in my arms 3 weeks before.
Wow.
About 2 months before I was involved in a fatal shooting, and so there was a lot going on. But that was the end for me. And I got to tell you, when that happens to you, you really start examining your life. And I was so fortunate, because once again, that same little angel that's been on my shoulder my entire career was on my shoulder that night as well. And the clot went through my brain, and aside from some memory loss, I pretty much came out of it really well.
Thank God. That's amazing. Let me, I'm going to get ahead a little bit of where I wanted to go with this, but what you just spoke about and what had kind of led to the end of your career at that time also eventually led to a book, correct? The Power of Legacy. You want to talk a little bit about that and how one kind of led to the next?
Yeah. And this is when I say that I literally led a blessed career. And once again, what I thought was the biggest misfortune, because that night I lost everything. I lost my career. I lost my health. I lost, my future that I had anticipated for myself. Yeah. And I mean, it's devastating. And it turns out that moment, that experience, because the doctors didn't help any when they told me that they found out why I had the stroke, that I had a serious heart condition, and I should plan for my own death, which is not what I had expected to hear. And that experience led me to some pretty incredible self-awareness and looking at my life and wondering how I was going to be remembered, what was going to be my legacy.
Right.
And as I was trying to process this new reality for me, I was thinking, how do I want to leave the world? And I knew that I'd already written 3 books, but all police books.
Right.
A Cop's Life, which was my biggest seller. My first one, which I wrote when I was in the training aspect, was this one right here, A True Blue: Police Stories by Those Who Have Lived Them. And I wrote that initial book. I had never intended to be a writer, ever. Never.
Okay.
It was never in my world. But I had a life-changing experience, as many cops do, on patrol, and I was placed in a position to save the life of a 1-month-old baby who'd been shot in the face.
Wow.
And the experience was so powerful that night I put a bottle of scotch in front of me and wrote the story about saving her life. It's called Her Name is Jackie. And that moment that I decided to put pen to paper would be a moment that at first I thought it was nothing, but turned out to be a life-changing moment for me, because what resulted from that was I had nothing to do with the story. I just felt I had to write it. So I got out the yellow pad and I did the story while I was drinking a bottle of scotch.
Yeah.
And just stuck it in a drawer. I had nothing to do with it. I just felt I needed to write it. So I wrote the story. I put it away. And then a couple of years later, the World Trade Center was attacked. And I was so frustrated at not being able to help those officers. 72 died that day.
Right.
That I got an idea. And I said, you know what? Every cop has a story like Jackie. I said, I'm going to ask them for those stories, and I'm going to put them in a book, and I'm going to show the people who cops really are. And I'm going to take every penny of those royalties, and I'm going to give them to the families of those officers who were killed. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
And that's what started my writing career. And St. Martin's Press, who published that book, liked my writing style so much, they offered me my own book contract for my own stories. And that was the second book, called A Cop's Life.
Okay. So that one is more your stories.
Those are all my stories, correct. Those are all my stories. And then a third book was another compilation called True Blue: To Protect and Serve. And I gave most of that money away to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. And it's, and I want to tell you this right now. I'm right now in the planning stages of doing a third in the series.
Okay.
So any of your audience that wants to write a story for this book, it's going to be another True Blue. Keep an eye on my Facebook page, which is The Voice of American Law Enforcement. And I'll be doing an announcement soon, because I want, this is going to be called the Heart Behind the Badge. Because now more than ever, we need to show the people who we truly are, and not the narrative of what is going on out there. So this is a really important book now, because we need to show why we are cops, who we are internally, and that we're not racist killers that like the media wants to portray us.
Amen. And that's great.
So as you said, that moment in time, I wanted to leave something, and I happened to be watching. I knew it was going to be a book. I just didn't know what it was going to be about. And I happened to be watching a television interview with Frank Shankwitz, the man who created the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Okay.
And very few people know this, but the man who created Make-A-Wish, Frank, did so when he was an Arizona State Trooper.
Huh.
So
I didn't know that.
A cop, street cop, created one of the most incredible charitable organizations in the world. And he stayed a cop for 40 years. Wow. And in fact, he is now a member of my board of directors.
Really?
Yeah, that's how the world works. So I see this interview, and it was like a lightning bolt, and I said, that's what I want to do. I want to talk to people like him about who it was in their life that made them who they are.
Yeah.
And as a result, the power of legacy, personal heroes of America's most inspiring people, was born. It was born from that.
Wow. And then is it more biographical where it goes into kind of their story, or?
No, stories that I went and interviewed amazing people like Frank, and Gary Sinise, and a whole bunch of folks that have done amazing things in their lives, but not about them. It's about who it was in their life that was their inspiration.
It's awesome.
With the idea that everybody can become a personal hero. Because if you change the life of one person, you've changed the world. And I think that's why people become cops, because they want to change. They want to make a difference in people's lives. And they do so every single day. But yet that gets lost in this garbage narrative. And so that's why I think cops are the most heroic people I know.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I love everything you're saying. That's exactly how I feel about it when it comes to mission. And you talk about making that difference in the lives of one. I sat in on an early leadership class, like a line supervision class, and the instructor had gone around the room. There was a lot of us from the same agency in the room, and she was talking about the idea of legacy and making a difference in the life of one person and so forth. And she was doing it more from a supervisory level, that, hey, you're going to have this opportunity as a supervisor now to make a difference in someone's life. And she had made the statement that there's probably someone in your life who's made a difference. And she went around the room. Well, out of all these people in this room, I would say probably like 10 or 14 of them, all from the same agency, mentioned the same person. Because, really? And it was all like, none of it was verbalized. Nobody knew who anyone else was writing down, but they all wrote down the same name. And it just went, in fact, it moved her so much. She was like, I want his contact information. I'm going to call him.
Yeah.
And she did. And she called the sergeant up and said, I want to let you know the difference that you've made in these people's lives. And it really shows exactly what you're saying, that you don't know. I mean, this guy is just a good guy, but he makes a difference in all these different lives. And then think of all the difference they've made.
And I'm sure he didn't even realize it.
No, he didn't. And he's just that guy. He's humble, just does a good job. Let me ask you, Randy, you talk in some of your presentations on this idea of policing with honor. Can you give us an overview of that concept?
Yeah. That was actually one of the first articles I ever wrote. And it was when I was in the training academy, when I was in that job, in charge of the supervisor of advanced training. And I had read some really disturbing headlines about cops, and corruption. And nothing offends me more than somebody who takes that badge and all that it means and just dishonors it. Yeah. And so I was very passionate about this article that I read, and I just, you're so frustrated because, when you believe so deeply in what that badge means, and then you see someone who takes it and just, doesn't care about it, and is willing to commit acts of corruption because of their own personal greed or gain, I find it really offensive. And so I thought about it, and I wrote this article called "Policing with Honor," and it really struck a chord, man. It was published in at least one of the major magazines at the time. And I started getting phone calls from different cops around the country and agencies saying, hey, do you do a presentation on this? And so I put it together, and I presented this called Policing with Honor, Surviving Your Career Ethically, as well as physically and emotionally. And I did this presentation all over the country, tens of thousands of cops over the years. It was, as a trainer, I was was frustrated in trying to find ethics training for cops, because it is, first of all, it's one of the most difficult topics that you can ever approach a cop about.
Right.
Like, who the hell is this guy to want to teach me ethics? And the fact is, he can't teach ethics. The people are either ethically inclined or not.
True.
And so you, in order to do a presentation on it, it's about information and awareness and leading people to come to their own conclusions. Yeah. And I was out there looking for ethics instructors. I was scouring the countryside, and I would attend ethics classes in order to, determine whether or not this guy was, a good instructor. And there were a couple decent ones, but most of them, they based their stuff on religion, or they based their stuff on, they didn't have the bona fides. They were speaking from an academic point of view.
Okay.
And if you're gonna bring in an instructor to a law enforcement class, yes, they better have the bona fides, right?
Oh yeah.
Because the cops have the biggest bullshit detectors, of anybody.
Yes.
So I started presenting on it myself, and and I'm very passionate about the topic. And so it was a very well received presentation. I did an 8-hour presentation on it, used a lot of video, and to stimulate thought, not to drive, hey, I'm better ethically than you are, because right. No one's better ethically than another person, but we stimulate thought by getting people, because let's face it, man, every decision that a cop makes, if it is not ethical, it can destroy them, their family, and the profession.
Yeah, it absolutely can. And I've seen that tragedy. I've seen it with good cops. Like you said, it's not something that can be taught. And I would even almost make the argument that a lot of the training on it almost comes down to safeguarding against temptations and against things that could happen to any of us at any time. You get worn down, and it becomes this decision making where in that moment you make a decision that can be career ending, ruin your family, whatever that situation may be.
Yeah. Hey, listen, the fact that these men and women now are being forced to wear body cameras, which I find onerous, but in this day and age, a matter of self-protection.
Yeah.
I was doing a national radio show the other day, and they were asking me about body cams and if I was in favor of them. And I said, when body cams first came out, when dash cams first came out, I was against them. We called it the punk in the trunk, because I found it, what's the word I'm looking for? I found it kind of repulsive that I had to be under surveillance for the decisions that I was making. And then when the first riots happened after Michael Brown and all that nonsense, and then the calls for body cams from the President of the United States, not to protect. The mantra was, we have to protect the people from these police. That's what body cams came out as, right. To protect the people from those police. Well, it turned out it was just the opposite, that these body cams are protecting the police from the people, and all of the lies and false allegations made against them.
Yep.
So now I'm a fan of the body cam, but I still find it offensive that we as cops have to be under 24-hour-a-day surveillance every time that we go on and put on a uniform. That's a big deal, man.
It is. And if we trust someone enough to say, I'm going to give you a badge and gun and allow you to make decisions, you would think we wouldn't need that. Now, I am much like what you just said. I came in right before body cameras. We're one of the first agencies to get them in the area. So I I have had them, and I've been on both sides. I haven't had them, and then I have had them. And it's funny, when we first got them, it's exactly what you said. In fact, you would get complaints as a supervisor, and they would be like, hey, such and such. And the first thing all you'd need to say is, by the way, I'll review the BW or the body worn camera. And their answer would be like, never mind, I won't withdraw my complaint.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So, so there is definitely an advantage there, because it kind of cuts through the bullshit, as you said.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's in fact, it's kind of amusing. Now there are some civil rights organizations that want the body cams turned off, because it didn't follow the narrative. They didn't get the result that they had hoped to get of all these cops acting criminally and unethically, and so they didn't get that. And now there's actually a movement in some areas to remove the body cams, which I find that to be kind of like the ultimate irony.
Exactly. But I think this career is full of irony, it seems like.
It is. Yeah, you're right.
Let me ask you kind of one of the more maybe fun things during your time when you were at Las Vegas Metro. Looks like you had the opportunity to be on the early days of the Cop Show for a while, and that may have segued into spending a little bit more time in front of the camera.
Yeah. I was one of the most featured officers on the show. I was actually on 3 different seasons. Wow. My first season was 1989, and as a patrolman. Wow. And a patrol officer, I should say, because we changed the name of that. And it was the second year of the show, so it was still a brand new concept. And actually, I was very much in favor of that show, because it was the first one that actually showed people what the police really do.
Right.
And I got kind of friendly with the folks that created the show, and it was interesting because they tried to sell that show for several years, and none of the networks would take it. They said, "Oh, that'll never work, and it'll never work." And literally, one of the guys was living out of his car because he wanted to get this show out there, and he lost all his money trying to sell it.
Right.
Well, then that was the year that Fox opened its new network as a cable. That's when cable came out, and they were desperately looking for content. So Fox picked up the show, and it was a hit immediately. It was the first reality show.
Right.
And they of course became filthy rich. But it gave me some amazing exposure. And as a result of that, I got called to try out for a film called Casino.
Yep. And
I get called by a casting agent, and they say, "Hey, there's going to be a film shot in Vegas, and the director is looking for realism in the part of a police officer. Would you come down and do an audition?" And I said, "Sure." I'm very comfortable in front of the camera anyways. It didn't really matter to me. And so I walked in the suite at the old Riviera Hotel, and who's standing there but Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese. And I was a little intimidated.
I'm sure.
And my audition consisted of me telling them war stories about being a Vegas cop. And they said, "You got the part, man." So that's awesome. How I got in the Screen Actors Guild, and I'm still acting today. I'm still doing movies. I just did, in fact, in the weird way that the world works, my last film was called Wish Man, about the man who created the Make-A-Wish Foundation. It's a fantastic movie. I urge everybody to take it. It's on Netflix right now.
I'll be sure to link that up.
But yeah, and then I was on again 94 and 96 as a sergeant, and then as a lieutenant, they didn't want any lieutenants. They just wanted the guys who were working the streets. But yeah, it gave me great exposure. It gave me it actually, all these stepping stones lead to destiny.
Yep.
And they led, all of these things are what led me to where I am now. And I don't think that I would have been in the position I am now as the founder of the Wounded Blue had it not been for all those experiences, good and bad.
Absolutely. Along those same lines, let me just ask, I'm assuming that we probably both hate cancel culture equally, but with these shows going off the air, what do you think that how do you think that affects law enforcement? Because shows like Live PD, like you just said, they showed the reality of it.
Yeah.
So do you think we're missing something, losing something by these shows being taken off?
Absolutely. It is so idiotic to take shows simply because there are police on them, showing what police do because of this narrative. It shows you the power of the new social media narrative. Shocking. I mean, A&E lost gazillions of dollars in revenue because they decided, oh, I mean, we can't show the police in a positive light. It's outrageous.
Right.
Outrageous what is happening. And you're seeing politicians pick up on it. You're seeing an entire corporate structure. I mean, my organization helps injured and disabled cops. I'm having a hell of a time trying to raise money for it. And yet Black Lives Matter, who is destroying, having major riots and attacking people, gets millions of dollars sent to them.
Right.
And corporate America, these morons up in that run Hollywood, decide we're taking the police shows off, to the point where, I mean, even cartoons with cartoon cops. It is so idiotic. It shows you how dumb that, I mean, literally, it's stupidity. And these are people making decisions that affect the lives of hundreds or thousands of people, either employees or people who are viewing the content. And so what happens? This becomes propaganda. You see propaganda now, anti-law enforcement propaganda being literally part of the new culture.
Right. And it's scary to think where that's going to lead to, because as that becomes the new narrative, people accept it, and they accept it as fact. And we're going to miss out on, well, that is of course why you do what you do, and why I'm doing what I'm doing, is to try to change this narrative and try to get this information out there. But still, I mean, I don't know, can it be enough? Those are the questions.
You know, there is a somewhat colorful term called shoveling shit against the tide. And I'm afraid that's what we are doing. But you know what? We can never give up this fight. We can never give up this fight. There always has to be a voice. And, you know, that's, I mean, my show is the voice of American law enforcement. And it's because I believe in the truth and telling the truth about the American law enforcement officer. And believe me, I get lots of hate mail.
Yes.
Let me put it that way. I had an experience the other day. Incredible, talking about cancel culture. So I am a commentator for a lot of news programs, right? Fox uses me a lot. I've been on CBS. I've been, you know, literally worldwide as a commentator on law enforcement topics. So lately, I've been doing a lot of court TV on a show called Crime Time. And what Crime Time is, they show videos of police interactions or experiences, and then they have two commentators, two former law enforcement officers. And so I've been on the show a bunch of times and giving my point of view about what I'm seeing. So last week they had me on, and they had a Black female retired LAPD sergeant. And the topic was the Blake shooting in Kenosha.
Okay.
Now, I happen to, you know, especially because of my Wounded Blue, I reach out to different agencies all over the country offering our services to help their wounded cops. So I made a connection with the Kenosha Police Department, and literally 2 hours before, remember there was a terrible void of information coming out. It was all, you know,
lots of rhetoric, but
police shot an unarmed Black guy in the back. The same narrative. Well, just 2 hours before this Crime Time show, I actually had been given the press release from the union that outlined exactly what happened from the police perspective.
Right.
So I'm the only one that had this information, literally, in the media. So here I am, and she starts off, the LAPD retired sergeant starts off, and I mean calling them murderers. They had no right to do this. They was this and that and this. I mean, really, they needed to be arrested for murder. It was outrageous what she said. So then came time for me, and I said, well, I happen to have the information from the law enforcement perspective in Kenosha that was just handed to me. Would you like to hear it? And the host said, hell yeah. And so I laid it out step by step what the reality was.
Right.
And she, of course, lost her mind. She's, that I made it up. And I mean, she's accusing me of shit. And it was pretty entertaining. Right. So, I think nothing about it. I mean, that was what I do. Well, 2 days goes by, and I'm booked on another court TV show the following day, and my PR person who books me on these shows contacts me, and she says, Randy, I just got off the phone with the producer of Crime Time, and they are just livid with you, and they want me to give you a warning that you better not ever do that again. That what you said upset the entire staff of Court TV. That they were outraged.
Providing facts.
For providing facts, right? And she says, "How do you want to proceed?" And I said, "Tell them to go screw themselves. I'm firing them. I don't need they don't do anything for me. Screw them." Well, she said, "Thank God you said that, because I knew you were going to say that." So she said, we're gonna blow it up. So if you go on my social media now, you will see the emails that the producer sent, basically telling me never to talk facts about about this topic, that everybody was so upset with me. So my partner Ray, who does Thin Blue Line and,
yes.
and America's Keepers, he went on the producer's social media site, right, Facebook,
yep,
and found out that she's an ultra liberal and a supporter of Black Lives Matter and anti-police.
Of course they are.
Yeah, and she's the one that came at me for telling the truth about Kenosha.
Wow. And that's too bad. Like, that is the part that to me is just mind-blowing, is how facts are actually upsetting people. We can't even have a conversation if we can't start with facts.
But it shows you the power of the media. I mean, can you imagine not wanting to have the facts, wanting a narrative, and if you dare say the facts, you get punished.
Right. Well, it's almost like we're living 1984. I'm just saying.
A court TV.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'll make sure I link all that up with your social media and everything.
Please do.
So here's my question. Is it as bad as it seems? I mean, we have these presumptions of incidents before any facts are presented. We have this defund the police movement, the removal of qualified immunity that they're trying for in some areas. But I want to offer these cops, these guys still out there on the line, some encouragement, some hope. So is it as bad as it seems? But then what do we do? What do we do as law enforcement, looking at it from kind of the bird's eye view that you can offer?
It's interesting that you say this, because I've been thinking along these lines, not only thinking about current cops, but who the hell is going to take the job? Yeah. And I wish I could tell you that that there's a light at the end of the rainbow, but I don't see it. What I do see is, this is not, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but this is not all happening by accident either.
No, it's not.
There is a funded movement that is literally trying to dismantle the criminal justice system in this country. That is the stated goal of Black Lives Matter. They don't make any bones about it. That is one of their goals. Antifa is being funded by a lot of money, and it is now a war of attrition. In Portland, we're seeing something that's never occurred before. 100 days of unmitigated violence. being basically empowered by the government, the mayor, the governor. And what this is doing is this is causing attrition of the police department. You're not getting guys who are literally just fleeing the job, and nobody's going to join them, because why would you do that now? So this is going to have long-term effects, and that's why we have to create the new blue. That's my hashtag, if you will. And we have to seriously recruit our young people into this job. Now, there's still, here's what, more than ever, what you feel inside about your passion for helping people, for playing a role that is positive in your community, needs to be brought out, and we need to recruit we need to be out actively showing the good that cops do. We have to fight hate with love. And I don't want to, make that sound, benign or, rosy, but really that's what we have to do, because the police job is so positive. You literally can change the world being a cop. And this is where we need to concentrate. This is where we need to really focus on, not all the hate, but to bring people in who want to do it for the right reasons and want to touch the lives of others. And, it's like, when the military went from draft into volunteerism.
Right.
The Army and everybody had a really tough time getting recruits. And so they started, offering things in college and this and that, and they were still having a tough time. What did the Marines do? They went just the opposite. They went to the recruiting the few, the proud, the Marines, and their numbers started climbing. Well, that's what we need to do in law enforcement. We need to be the few, the proud, the police.
Yeah, I love that. Kind of as a final takeaway, which really you may have just said it, but what is there? A lot of what I like to focus on is also officers' personal lives. So is there one thing, we've gone over a lot of different things, but one takeaway that law enforcement officers can do that's going to make a difference in their personal lives?
Yeah, balance. It can't be overstated. I was very fortunate to meet one of the finest law enforcement instructors that ever existed, Kevin Gilmartin. Dr. Kevin Gilmartin was a police officer down in Arizona. He was a street cop, and then he got his degree in psychology, and he wrote a book which should be mandatory reading for every single police officer in the country, called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement.
Yep.
And I was so fortunate because I met him when I was in charge of training, and wound up booking him. I did train every cop in Las Vegas PD at that time, received this training. And first of all, his presentation is when he's instructing, he's one of the best instructors I've ever seen. Secondly, his message is vital, and that is, don't just be a cop. If you just be a cop, it'll eat you up. It'll destroy your life. You have to have balance in your life. You have to have love. You have to have family. You have to keep your friends that you had before you became a cop. You have to have other interests. You have to continue to grow emotionally and intellectually, and not let this job destroy you. And I got to tell you, I know this from firsthand experience. When I was a young cop, all I did was live, eat, drink. And my mentor, the guy who I really looked up to, this guy, even in his off-duty time, he bought an old police car and he outfitted it with lights and a siren so he could stop people. And I thought that was the shit, man. And then when he retired, he had nothing. He had no life.
Right.
And the inevitable happened. So I can't stress enough. When you're working, go out there and be the best you can be. don't let the politics and the narrative destroy you, because it can debilitate you. Realize your self-worth, realize what you are and who you are, that you are a warrior, and that warrior doesn't have to be because of combat, but because of a mental toughness that you need to have in order to survive this job. Be proud of who you are. It's statistically harder to become a cop than it is to become a doctor. And knowing that, having that feeling of pride within yourself can shield you, I believe, from being consumed by much of the hate that's out there.
That's awesome. That's great advice. How can people connect with you, Randy?
I am about the easiest person in the world to find. Okay. My organization is thewoundedblue.org. And if you are an officer who has been injured in the line of duty, whether that injury is physical or emotional, contact my organization. I have what we do is we provide peer support for injured and disabled cops. My team of peer advocate support team members are amazing. Every one of my guys has been shot, stabbed, beaten, run over, screwed up, and screwed over. And they know what it feels like to be abandoned and alone. In fact, our motto is never forgotten, never alone, because so often that's exactly what happens when you get injured in the line of duty, and whether that injury is physical or emotional. So we provide peer support for them. We also are a resource for getting people into treatment when they need psychological treatment or addiction treatment. We have a canine companion program that's amazing. We provide emotional support, French bulldogs that are just amazing.
That's awesome.
So we help get guys service dogs if they need them. And we have a program that is incredible. I want everybody to go to this website, thewoundedblue.org, and look at Code 4 Total Wellness. Consider this. We just launched this, and this is amazing. Every cop in America should have this. This program, and we give it. That's what we do with the money that we raise. Besides peer support, we give this program away to injured officers. And what it does is it gives them 24-hour-a-day telemedicine with licensed MDs. It gives them prescription drug discounts that are unbelievable, discounts for x-rays, for all kinds of medical stuff. It gives them financial counseling, because so many times the stress that comes with this job is because they don't get paid much. Right. So having that counseling is important. But then we also have what's called CAPER, the Confidential Assistance Program for Emergency Responders, and this is unbelievable. You get unlimited visits with licensed psychologists to help you deal with post-traumatic stress injury and other stressors. Wow. Not only for you, but for your family as well, your immediate family. Think of this. Now, you can get this on our website, and it costs, like, I think, $17 a month. But if you're injured, if you've been injured in the line of duty, contact us, and we will provide it to you for a year for free. Wow. So we're doing this all over the country. In fact, we just, and this is pretty cool. This is how, one of the ways that we know that there's so many people that support cops. We just gave this to every member of a small department that dealt with the murder of one of their leaders. It was an ambush murder, and you know, when you deal with that type of trauma, it can really severely affect them. Yeah. And so we gave this to every single member of this 30-officer police department, and it's helped tremendously. So what happens is sometimes a business will come to us and say, you know what, I want to get that for my police department, or I want to give so much money and make sure that you know, it pays for 6 cops or whatever it is for a year. So please, if you're a law enforcement officer or you know one, have them check out Code 4 Total Wellness. They can get it on their own, and if it's somebody that you know that's been injured, contact us on our website, and we'll give it to them.
That's great. I will definitely link all that up. I mean, you're doing some phenomenal things, Randy. This conversation has not disappointed. I really appreciate you being willing to come on, and I really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Thanks.